That's so bad. But let's get to a
Absolutely.
positive.
For sure.
Has there been any, I'm pretty sure there has been positives that have occurred or have movements that have changed in a sense, but has there been any like not so like important movements or improvements that have happened in like the last few years with the whole Black Lives Matter movement that you have seen in regards to police brutality or racial issues, and what are those positives in a sense?
So I remember, around 2012, what we were asking for is body cams. So initially, we believed because what was happening is there was no police evidence of what was happening. We only had civilian evidence. So
Mm-hmm.
then there was the logic that if we got police evidence of these incidents, that would be on file. Officers would more than likely be arrested, indicted, and not only fired, but you know, they would see actual prison time and punishment. Um, we successfully got body cams, but then there were situations where police officers were not turning them on, or situations where police officers were turning them off and then committing the violence. So it was like, okay, I see your body cam, turn off game. I will raise you. The conversation kind of just continues to kind of grow and evolve. So currently, the conversation that we're having right now is around the elimination of qualified immunity and the defunding of the police, right? So when people immediately hear, well, first, the whole qualified immunity thing goes to the fact that, police officers have immunity so that they can shoot a Black person and they cannot lose their job, they cannot be arrested, this kind of stuff. So that's the law that many people are trying to overturn and get changed, so that it's like, no, if you shoot an unarmed Black person, there is legal consequence. Currently, the way the police system is set up, there is no legal consequence for shooting an unarmed person, regardless of race.
Mm-hmm.
That said, there is also a high militarization of the police here in the States. So, for example, like I was talking about within those communities, right? You can have, communities in poor, you can have poor communities where the police officers there have, let's say, like a 2 million or even sometimes $2 billion budget. So you have local police officers that have access to military type weapons. They have tanks, they have grenades, they've got gas, they've got guns, they've got, a myriad of things that you see and use in wartime,
Mm-hmm.
which goes why I said very apropos and insightful statement, because the police are actively bringing and using war-like weapons, tactics, and trinkets on civilian territory in low income communities, specifically targeting Black people. And so when we say defund the police here in the States, what we are saying is we want to lower that budget. If a police station, or a police department rather, has $2 billion, we're saying, why don't we lower that budget? And that way, instead of at our low income public schools, we have actual police officers and metal detectors and all this kind of stuff, but we don't have school counselors, we don't have school nurses, we don't have teachers, but you got cops. You got enough cops at the school, but you don't got enough qualified teachers, no counselors, no nurses. Okay. So our thing is, if we lower that budget, and then we can now reallocate these funds into other social services in the community, because the thinking is, if we can build up our education system in these communities, if we can build up the healthcare opportunities in these communities, both for physical health as well as mental health, if you reallocate these funds so that people can get the help that they need in terms of employment, right, then you lessen the need for police, and you also lessen the need for them to use this kind of weaponry. So defund the police does not equal abolish the police. Some are asking for the abolition of the police. There are some communities who have already done this, right?
Oh.
So absolutely. There are some states like New Jersey who has successfully both defunded and almost very closely abolished the police. And they have reallocated these funds towards the social services like I was just talking about. And not only did criminality go down, but the quality of living for many people went up. And so what we're saying when you hear the term defund the police is people are saying, let's start doing for Black communities what we've been doing for white communities all along. Yeah,
equality, guys, equality.
let's give Black people access to great teachers. Let's give them access to banks. Let's give them access to grocery stores. Let's give them access to healthcare. Let's give them access to mental health counselors. Let's take the police out of our schools, and let's take the metal detectors out of our schools, and instead let's start adding some nurses. Let's start adding some social workers. Let's start adding some guidance counselors, right? And let's pour into our low income communities with resources and funding in the same way that we pour into our white or even affluent communities. And that is kind of what people are looking for. Now, another thing that is on the docket that has been a successful kind of a legislative move is what is called the Breonna Taylor law in Louisville. So that was actually passed at the local level, which is a really great success. Because basically what they did was they completely outlawed no-knock warrants. So it is illegal for any officer to bust in the home of a person without knocking and without a warrant. Now, what is problematic is that the city has effectively passed a law without arresting the officers that killed the woman that created the need for the law. So we're all still out here still demanding that the officers that killed Breonna Taylor be arrested, indicted, and jailed. Because, as great as it is to have a Breonna Taylor law on the books and to have that law there so that this kind of an incident does not happen again, what is bad is that we still haven't gotten justice for the woman the law's named after. Yeah. And this is something, we really can't even, go into fully, but, police brutality is not a Black man issue. Police brutality is a threat to all Black people, and Black women experience just as much violence from the police, both physical and sexual, that Black men don't experience, at least from the sexual side. But we are both being equally targeted. And so we cannot continue to rally around the deaths and the assaults of Black men to the neglect of the deaths and assaults around Black women. And so this, unfortunately, is kind of we believe, aiding into why we have yet to really receive any justice around the murder of Breonna Taylor. And then finally, we have on the books as well the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. This is a federal law that has passed in the House, but it has not yet passed in the Senate. And so, our democratic setup is great and bad. And so it's great to have a variety of chains that things have to go through, a decentralized government. Yeah. At the same time, though, the House has passed this bill. Now it is up to Mitch McConnell to pass this and get this passed in the Senate. And because we have a majority Republican Senate, there is a fear that this will not get passed because, many of the Republicans here white individuals who do not believe that policing is an issue, and of course do not back or support any idea surrounding the defunding of the police, because again, they think that it is not about giving Black people more resources, it is that we are inherently criminal. And so if we can get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act successfully passed in the Senate, and it can go up to President Trump, at that point, he will sign it into law. At least that's the process. And then we would have that on the books as well. And that would be a huge assistance. You know, police brutality is most certainly a local state issue.
Yeah.
But there are definitely things that we can have on our federal books as well that would really aid in legislating the protection of Black bodies, at least by police officers. And so, you know, we're doing our best to try to make police brutality illegal. And so we've definitely had we've definitely had significant legislative success. You know, many things happen at the local level. You know, many organizers and individuals have been able to get Black district attorneys elected in various states and various counties. You know, get Black prosecutors, you get different people in different positions, so that at the local level, you begin to have a lot more accountability when these cases come up, or just an altogether decrease in these cases in certain states and locations. And so that's always great. So we're continuing to fight for more local legislative change, but we're also just kind of advocating, praying, and talking about the need for this federal bill to kind of go all the way up and pass as well.
Yeah, I saw earlier, I think it was earlier this year, quite a few CEOs or like high-ranking people were giving away their jobs to like try to put in more Black people in their businesses and stuff. I think who's the guy from Reddit, Serena Williams' husband?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, I can't say his surname, so I'm like, Alexis.
Oh yeah, Alexis Olympia, something like that. Yeah, I say the same thing. Serena's husband.
And he gave away his role as, I don't know if it was a CEO, but he gave away his role and he employed a Black woman in his place. And I'm like, that's like the stuff that I want to see. I'm like, this is positive movement. Yes, good.
Right. Well, that, yeah, you know, and that's more so from the standpoint of, you know, many of these large corporations were like pledging millions of dollars like to anti-racism, or they're pledging millions of dollars to like police brutality. But it's like, these are issues. So where are these funds going?
That's what people are saying, yeah.
But like,
so they're like, there was no actual place they were going to. They were just like, send money.
So there was that. And then on top of that, there was also this, many of the Black employees for many of these companies were like, okay, now all of a sudden y'all care about being anti-racist, and now all of a sudden y'all don't want no police brutality, but your entire executive structure is nothing but white.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a part of, you know, making change and uplifting Black people, you got to start moving some people out the way. And, you know, Alexis was one of the individuals who really said, not only, I'm not just going to, you know, bring a person onto my executive team or on my board, I'm actively going to sit myself down as being the highest ranking person in my company. And I'm going to replace that person. I'm going to replace myself with a Black person. And I think that was really powerful. Netflix also put, I think, like $100 million in a Black-owned bank. Like they opened an account with a Black-owned bank and put about $100 million of their money in there. That is a huge thing to do. So there have definitely been, you know, some great social and cultural moves as well as political ones. And so definitely some victories, but there's still a whole lot of work left to do. So, you know, can't get
lazy now.
Do not get comfortable because Netflix put money in a black bank. Like, do not get comfortable. And we have a tendency to do that. We come to a really big win, and then it's like, okay, we just got rid of segregation. Okay, now everybody kind of like calms down, right? Okay. Oh, we have a black president. Everybody calms down, right? So we've got to kind of find ourselves, not doing that in this situation as well. Like if we get these bills passed, and we see what's going on in the culture with the hiring of black executive leaders, and even the investing of huge white corporate dollars into black communities, black businesses, black institutions. We have to see that as a win, but not see that as, okay, now we can calm down because things are progressing. It is like, okay, bet there's some momentum that's happening in the culture, and that's we've got to continue to ride this wave and see how much we can continue to progress and push forward.
No, that's so true. You were saying, we're gonna get to the last question, but you were saying in regards to like the defunding of the police and redirecting the funds into schooling and to the basically into the lower lower income neighborhoods and stuff. And I think I totally agree with that. Like, if you can give money to schools, I'm like, yes, because I think there's a saying that says an idle mind is a dangerous mind, in the sense that if a kid doesn't have anything to do, they will do the total opposite of what they need to be doing, and get themselves into trouble. But like, if that can happen, if that law gets passed, that's amazing. My thing is that everyone knows education is power. So would the white people want to give power to the black people? In the sense that if they go to school and they know what's happening and they understand, like, if they don't want that, they might, cut the law straight before it even gets to be passed, in a sense. So that's my thing. I'm scared that might happen. Yeah, I'm just being devil advocate because I'm like,
no, that's absolutely great. That's what you're supposed to do as an interviewer. Yeah, you're doing great. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, because I was thinking, like, back in history, if the reason why they didn't educate black people in general was because then white people were educated, they got the jobs, they were more affluent, they had more opportunities in a sense. I'm like, would they be willing to educate you or give you the funds or give you the resources that you can educate yourself? Would they be okay with, like, would that sit okay in the white man's soul, is my thing. Then in a sense,
I see what you're saying. I have a better understanding of what you're saying. Yeah. I think, so, man, there are 100 ways to answer this. I have a better understanding of what you're saying now. There's definitely a history of, white people intentionally, it was illegal for a black person to read or write. It was illegal to teach a black person to read or write. The thinking is that, an educated mind cannot be enslaved. Right? An educated mind is going to immediately know, understand their worth, their value. They'll understand how systems and structures operate, and then they will no longer be compliant with bondage. And that is literally what happened. Even as much as they tried to keep black or African slaves ignorant, we still learned a variety of things, picked up because we're human beings.
They didn't believe that.
No, they did not. They had a variety of pseudoscience suggesting that we could not learn unless taught by them. Clearly, that's not a thing. Like any human being, if in an environment long enough and with enough intentionality, can learn anything. And that's what we saw. We saw that kind of tenacity, that kind of resilience, where we suffered and endured and placed ourselves in a position to where we could even die, just so that we could learn and grow and expand our minds. And so that is our history. That is the train of thought and thinking. Now, I think that the white psyche more currently has kind of moved away from maybe that traditional mindset of, you know, we don't want the Black man to be educated. But at the same time, I know, you know, many others, I'm sure, you know, this isn't an area that I research a lot, but the more that I'm thinking about it, I'm sure there are individuals who kind of specialize in education and do a lot of research in that end that would probably tell me, Claudia, I'm telling you, they still want to keep us illiterate, right? Because there are systems that keep Black children from being able to learn how to read. So, there are so many low-income communities where you have adults that cannot read above a third, fourth grade education, who cannot write. You know, so there are a lot of systems that are still in place to really prevent the education of Black people that could most certainly support your claim that maybe white people, even in the 21st century here in the States, do not want Black people educated. And more than likely they do not, because the moment that we become educated about anything that has to do with finances, anything that has to do with politics, anything that has to do with society, anything about religion, the moment that we become educated and literate, we become dissatisfied with their foolishness, right? So that's the whole point. It all works together, right? The more I can continue to keep things redlined, continue to keep things disenfranchised, continue to keep you eating unhealthy, continue to keep you incarcerated, continue to enact terrorist violence on your communities, I keep you in a psychologically dependent state. I keep you in a psychologically vulnerable, compressed, broken state to where you potentially will not have the mental bandwidth and or knowledge to adequately buttress the various systems and institutions that are disenfranchising you. So that the fact, for example, right, like us rioting doesn't change anything. So we can think and process and try our best to make change, but if we don't really understand how the systems work, how they operate, what they are doing, then, and all we're doing is destroying property, again, we're not getting to the root and the core of the issues. And so, yeah, sure. I'll go ahead with that premise and say, yeah, maybe white people do not want us to be educated and do not want us to learn and to grow. There is strong history. There is strong historical evidence that certainly supports that claim. And there is certainly a lot of disenfranchisement within our education system currently that also supports that claim. And ultimately, like I said, you know, lack of education is intimately attached to or the thinking is, I think that their broken thinking is that if I keep these people uneducated, then they will not be dissatisfied. But what they must understand is that regardless of what for 400 years we've been dissatisfied, we'll continue to be dissatisfied, we'll continue to work for justice, because regardless of whether or not I'm educated in the way that you are, there is something innate in humanity that lets you know that you are being treated unfairly. And I don't need a degree to know that. I don't need to have read an updated textbook to be able to feel and process that. And so I think that that's the reality that they're not receiving. And it's why we're continuing to fight people who are unemployed, people who have nothing but an 8th grade level education, people who have no degrees above high school are on the front line. They're the ones that are on the mics. They are the ones that are pushing these efforts forward, because fighting for justice does not require a PhD. It does not require a master's. It does not require a bachelor's. It requires a heart and understanding for justice and equality. And that is what our people have. We have that resilience, we have that understanding, we have that push. And so that is why, regardless of whether or not you systematically work to not educate me, I will continue to attack and oppose your system of injustice.
No, that's so true. Dang, good answer. So you mentioned before about the Morning Star and how it was used to educate African Americans that were basically never had any education, and through that also teach them, faith and about Christianity and all that stuff. So going into my last two questions, since the church, because from my understanding, the Morning Star was Adventist, or it was Christian based, and we had such a pivotal point in educating African Americans. Has the church, or is the church still being pivotal in moving in regards to African Americans and racism and police brutality? Have you seen the church do anything in that regard, in a sense?
Yes and no. I think the Seventh-day Adventist Church most certainly it has its origins of engagement in the abolition movement, and so that's why you have like the Morning Star Steamboat situation. Ellen White and many of our church founders were adamant about participating in and openly and very explicitly rebuking the American sin of slavery. And so she was very adamant about that. Ellen White gave many a speech, many a sermon, speaking to the General Conference, specifically at saying that, white people, white Adventists, have a duty to uplift Black people in this country because of the things that they have experienced. Now, despite having those origins, despite all of that work, Ellen White received a lot of backlash for that work. In fact, I firmly believe that she was sent to your country, Australia, as punishment for the work that she was doing here. Because of that, though, right, we do have a church culture, an underlying culture that does not care about Black American issues. And so there is an intense concern about international mission. There is an intense concern about giving people the message of the gospel and the second coming. But there is not an intense work or care about what is happening to the physical bodies of the very people that they are seeking to evangelize. And so there was most certainly a very long period where the church became extremely passive and actually discouraged any kind of social engagement whatsoever. We are currently in a time and space where individuals like myself and many others are seeking to call the church out of that spiritual paralysis and back to their origins as abolitionists, and calling our global church leadership in particular to begin to speak out against these kinds of systematic killings, white supremacy, and the workings of racism and the way that it manifests in harm towards Black people. I have not yet seen structurally or systemically any kind of a consistent effort in that work. However, individuals like former President Dan Jackson of the North American Division was very adamant about speaking out against police brutality, against racism. And he definitely had multiple statements coming out of his office, whether it was on the Trayvon Martin situation or the Mike Brown situation. And so what we are seeing now is we're seeing at least statements from the North American Division as well as from our regional conference leadership, um, where they are acknowledging and stating, you know, we stand with the individuals and the families that are grieving during this time. Now, quite frankly, I do believe that a lot of times these statements are extremely vague. They do not speak specifically to what happened. They don't denounce the violence. They don't denounce racism or white supremacy. And so, at least from the North American division, you know, regional conference leadership gets very specific because that's Black American Adventist leadership in the church, and they're speaking to Black Adventist constituents. So, yeah, I think that our NAD statements could be a lot clearer. I also think that within our church, we need specific structures and offices in place to partner with communities to do this work, right? As much as we don't like it, the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, the Episcopal Church, the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, these individuals have offices and departments within their Christian body that actively work in communities with nonprofits, organizing around these kinds of social and political issues. The Seventh-day Adventist Church does not have anything remotely close to that. So all you get from the church is statements. And what I would love to see is that whether it be at the regional conference leadership, the union level, or the NAD level, yay, the GC level, that there be departments, offices, positions, entities, individuals whose sole job is to be on the ground when these things happen, organizing and working with various leaders, religious and political, to both make change so that these things don't happen, but to also provide the spiritual and emotional support that the families need during these difficult times. I think that we have certainly listened, and many at various levels have been open to conversation, to learn and grow around these issues and to talk about what could potentially happen. But I fundamentally believe that until we address the racism that is inherent within the structure of our own church, we are ill-equipped to deal with the racism that is happening within the states, yea, the world at large. When we have a world church president who says that, you know, he does not address race and racism because that's a North American division issue, and that he wants to focus on missions because he's the global president, that right there lets me know that you are uneducated on what race and racism is and how it is impacting missions globally. You cannot tell me that race and racism is not impacting missions in South Africa, that it's not impacting missions in England, that it's not impacting missions in Australia. Race and racism might not look the same as it does in America, but it most certainly is making a critical impact in India, in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Australia, in Asia, on every single continent other than Antarctica. And so when we grow to having a robust understanding of what race is and how racism operates, particularly within a global context, I think that our world church will be better positioned to do contemporary missions and ministry. Also said, that kind of a mindset is what also permits our world church to not see Black leadership at the highest levels of the church. For our church to have been in existence for over 100 years, and for it to have never, the world church, to have never seen a Black president or a president of color of any kind, yet the world church is probably at least 80% brown, right? Like when we think about the world church, it is at least 80% black and brown people, because the world is,
Yeah,
So
someone told me that the Adventist church is the most multicultural church. But then I'm like, every time I walk into like the head office, I'm like, where's the multicultural people?
Absolutely. It most certainly is the most diverse church, because it's the amount of worldwide impact, right? Is phenomenal. Now, let's be clear. I think as Adventists, we also have a tendency to be very narcissistic. Islam is a much larger world religion, right? So that technically Islam is the most diverse church, right? Like Islam is the most diverse world religion, right? There are other Christian denominations that are also worldwide. Catholicism, for example, is also worldwide, pretty diverse. So yeah, I think that like we have a tendency to just be we're so diverse. Oh my gosh, guys, we're so diverse. It's like, okay, you have Asian members and you have Indian members and Black members and white members, and that is awesome. When you show me that kind of diversity in your executive leadership, then we can have a conversation. I'll be super excited. Now, I am very impressed and excited about the kind of leadership transitions that are happening in the North American division. We recently elected our new president of the NAD. That is a Black man by the name of Elder Alexander Bryant. And we also just elected our new executive secretary, who is an Asian gentleman by the name of Dr. I cannot remember his first name, but it's Dr. An. So North American division leadership is beginning to diversify and understand the importance of eliminating this kind of old white man executive leadership breakdown. But when you've got systemic and institutional baggage and discrimination in your house, it is very difficult to be able to identify that kind of discrimination outside as problematic. And so my prayer is that our church, even as it continues to grow and being more comfortable voicing and making statements in favor of and against what's going on in our society at large, my prayer is that we really turn to structural change at all the levels of our church, so that we have individuals and entities who are boots on the ground making change in these local communities, but that we also are making change within our own executive leadership, so that our world church and our diversity is as properly represented as it is praised and referenced.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, you were saying, as you were talking about the statements, we sort of had the same issue here in this regards to, I feel like everyone started putting out a statement because the GC put out a statement. So I'm like, okay, everybody has to put out a statement. And I totally respect them writing a statement, but our statement from our union, oh Lord, I better not get fired. But it was just very blasé. I was like, it was very disconnected from the actual issue. And I get it, like we're not in America, we're not there where like the action is happening, but we're not there, so we don't experience it. But I'm like, at least do research to at least have it be at least even the slightest bit heartfelt. Okay, for me as a Black person to read and be like, ugh. Like it just.
And if you feel like that in Australia, friend, imagine what we feel like when we read it.
Yeah, so I was just like, we can do so much more. And okay, yes, if your statement isn't the best, maybe you didn't have a great communications leader, understood, keep it moving. I don't feel like we actually did anything other than the statement, in the sense that even though we did have,
it's not a feeling, sis. We didn't. It's not a feeling. Go ahead. It's a fact. It's not a feeling. I just wanted to correct that. It's not a feeling. It's a fact. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the fact was they didn't do anything. Because I'm like, we still had like Black Lives Matter movements and stuff, and protests happening. I think that same weekend, and I'm pretty sure I didn't see one. Like, I didn't know one pastor that went to one of those protests. Like, and of course he's Black, so
in Australia.
Like, in Australia. Yeah, so for us down here, and it was only one pastor that I saw actually go to one. And even though, yes, our leaders and general conference people were sending out statements, none of them actually went out of their way to even just walk. Like, it's not going to hurt you to walk in the protest or walk in the march, and just to be a voice. Like, for you to write a statement, it's like part of the job. It's not because you actually feel like you don't have any connection to it, in a sense, and you don't actually understand why you're saying the statement that you're saying. And I wish that we do make more movements in Australia, because yes, we might not have the same racism as in America, but we do have Aboriginals, and that's a whole systematic situation as well. And then we also have our Afro Australians, so our Black African Australians who have moved over as immigrants and refugees, and it's like that's a whole nother situation to deal with. But we're not doing anything in those areas. I don't see anyone helping refugees. I don't see anyone helping the Aboriginals. I don't feel like I see hands-on things that are actually making progressive change, in a sense. Yeah, so I'm on the same boat as you. We have statements, but nothing else. So
yeah, and that's, full agreement.
I felt that sigh.
I think the thing that kind of came to my mind as you were sharing, I went to, we had a historic march here in the States 57 years ago. The March on Washington, 1963, August, yeah, right, Claudia? August 28th, 1963. That's when, Dr. King, gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And, there were, thousands of people there, right? And we just had that again 57 years later on Friday. And I know that there were some Adventists there. I was there. And I've been seeing all on my timeline a variety of different pastors and kind of local church leaders, friends of mine, just members of the Adventist church that were present and accounted for with their signs, their Black, the African American flag and their posters and T-shirts and everything, really being a part. And feeling and demonstrating alongside with the people. And, we were really dispersed, mixed in. There wasn't like here are the Adventists and here's our Adventist banner and we're here. It was more like, everybody just kind of came in, kind of found themselves in there. But as you were talking, it did kind of hit me that, man, how amazing would it have been to have run into, Alexander Bryant, at that march, NAD president, Black man, how epic would it have been to have seen Dr. An, at that march, President Wilson at that march, our key leaders, and not just them, but the communications guy that writes the statements. Like maybe he could have got like some language from all these speeches to help him with the next one. It makes you think that we're not asking for statements to be appeased And so don't write statements from a place of like, okay, we'll tolerate them and we'll say whatever they need to hear, and we're praying for the families and everything will be all right. Jesus is coming. What we're wanting for our church to feel what we feel. And a lot of times that emotion that we started this conversation off with, that heaviness, that darkness, that depression, that mourning that we as Blacks in America feel, we oftentimes do not read that in the statements.
Yeah.
There seems to not be an acknowledgement or an empathy. You have yet to empathize. You have not felt what I have felt. And you are not writing a statement from a position of having felt what I felt. And when you read that from your church, it's very discouraging. And it makes you feel like they don't care. They're not interested in learning, like you're talking about. All those individuals all went to Adventist schools to get their theological and MDiv education. And they're all in these various positions, and they have not been trained in critical race theory. They have not been trained in sociology and history and political science. They have not been trained in these ideas. So they do not have the language to properly articulate what's going on. But even if you don't have that, you really don't even need all that to make a proper statement. Really, all you need is to kind of release yourself of the internal white supremacy that you have accepted as a white or Black Adventist, and then be able to actually call out that white supremacy, call out that racism, call out literally the nationalism that you see Jesus calling out in the Gospels, and write that with power, conviction, and Holy Spirit boldness in the statement. But you're not going to get there. You're not going to write those kinds of words if you have not felt what I felt. And so, yeah, I think that unfortunately, Black Americans are a part of a religion, a denomination that seems to consistently portray and express a lack of care, a lack of desire to empathize, feel, or participate in anything that has to do with the protection of their bodies and the promotion of their lives. And that is a very difficult space to be in. And that is certainly a concern that I have for my church and for the Black people in it, because the reality is many might not stay long under those kinds of conditions. And so, yeah, before I guess you even get to all the structural things I suggested and all the systemic things I suggested, I guess my prayer for my church is that they simply feel what I feel. And I have yet to see them or read anything from them that suggests that they feel what I feel.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I would, like, as you're speaking, I was like, because as you're talking, I'm like, there's such a disconnect. Like in the statements, there's such a disconnect. I'm like, I would rather not even you write anything. Like, if you don't understand, just throw the paper.
Nah, you got to say something, because I will drag you if you don't say If you don't say a gosh darn thing, if you are silent, I will make a Facebook status quickly. And I actually am not a quick person to make statuses. My friend Tiffany Llewellyn, president of Adventist for Social Justice, though, she will drag a leader of any color. So
Wow.
between me and her, you gotta make a statement. Yeah, no, don't listen. If y'all see this, okay, don't listen to Key. You got to make a statement, okay? That vague thing you wrote, you got to post that. You got to post that. And if anything, hit me up, and then we can work together about writing a more specific one. But listen,
That's what I wish they did. I wish they spoke to someone of color to actually understand what is actually happening. Because I feel like when I'm reading some of the statements, I'm like, you have Google. It's not hard to know the information. Like literally, I'm like, there's so many avenues you could get to help you, if not the Holy Spirit. Like, come on, like there's so many other situations or people around you who can help you. Be like, this is what it is. This is how we're feeling. This is the full story. Now go right. But like when I'm reading it, I'm like, all you did was watch the news. Okay, this person died. Okay, now let me. It's like writing like an obituary, but not with all the lovely things like, oh, this was the father of, like it wasn't. Even an obituary was nicer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it was tough.
I think that's, yeah, I think that's a great point. That's a great point. And maybe they will prayerfully they will grow to that place. But until then, I guess we just kind of remain prayerful.
Yeah.
Everything.
But to end everything off, what as individuals, so as Adventist individuals, because that's who our audience is, and then young adults, our audience is young adult Adventists. What can we do to help spread the news, or what can we do anyway in regards to this injustice? So in regards to race, because it's in both countries, it's everywhere. It's not like only in America, but how can we help move forward in breaking these systems and in breaking these injustices around the world in regards to race and police brutality?
Man, that's such a difficult question. But one of the things that I would say is I think if we can partner awareness with organizing, I think that we could get a lot of good done. Because like I said, I know here in the States, police brutality and racism here is both a local and federal issue. And so, we've got to continue talking about it. We've got to continue writing about it. We've got to continue preaching about it from the pulpit. We've got to put it on all of our platforms all of the time, not just during Black History Month, not just when somebody dies, but this has to be in constant conversation to the point where it completely changes culture, completely changes the way that we think and operate and function. And it puts us in a place of, oh no, we have to change this because we're talking about it all the time and everyone is aware. But awareness does not equal justice alone. So all these panels, all this preaching, all this writing, all this talking does not always directly impact the changing of policies, systems, and structures. That only happens with organizing. And so at some point, we've got to really organize with our local communities to really make change within our respective countries. I think that in terms of making change for racism within our church at large, I think it's a similar thing. I think that we can definitely work for awareness. And I think that we can actually partner together around the world. I mean, if COVID has taught us anything, it is that there are no borders and there are no barriers. And so what if the Adventist church globally was nonstop tweeting, posting, writing, preaching, publishing, conversing, panels about racism in the church? Nonstop, not just when people died, but like you got people in Germany that are like, oh yeah, by the way, remember Nazis? You got people in South Africa talking about, oh, remember how the first Christian church that promoted apartheid was a white Adventist church in South Africa, right? You got people in, oh yes, oh yes, sis, oh yes, sis, okay?
I lived there and no one told me that.
Okay, listen here, all right? So like I think that if we could just at least on the, remember, I'm talking about awareness. On the awareness tip, you know, and I guess I'm on an international platform. So if I could talk to the world right now, right? What if every single one of us was constantly talking and posting about race and racism and speaking against it with scripture and preaching it and writing articles and posts and really just like, our church has to do better. We have a horrible history when it comes to race globally. How can we do better? What are we going to do? I think that that would put so much pressure on on our president, Ted Wilson, that he would have to educate himself. He would have to put systems in place. You know what I'm saying? You know, rather than, or not rather than, but not just posting and things on social media and talking from our churches and pulpits and blogs. But what if we had people calling our division offices, our union offices, our conference offices, our GC office on the phone, email? What if we all around the world were just hitting these leaders up like, y'all got to fix this? Like, I'm not good. I'm not going to stay Adventist if you don't fix this. Fix this, because I'm not going to stay Adventist. Hey, I don't think you received my last email. I really need you to understand. You have to fix this or else I'm not going to stay Adventist. Did you see my tweet this morning? I tweeted at you because I really want you to understand that you have to fix this if you want me to stay Adventist. If we had that kind of global awareness campaign where we all were just on this thing non-stop and just said the SDA church has to get it together. I think that that could really make some change, but I think that there are also ways for us to organize both globally and within our respective divisions and conferences and locally, so that we can also make change within the Adventist structures in which we live and operate as well. And so I think that that's what we need. We need, you know, some hardcore awareness, and we need that hardcore awareness to be met and married to some hardcore organizing. But let us not work so hard to change and transform our church that we neglect partnering with our communities to change and transform the lives of people, right? So that while I'm emailing and calling President Wilson, I have not really partnered with anyone to ensure that there is not another Jacob Blake situation, right? It's gotta be a both and. It's gotta be a working to eradicate race and racism, and working against white supremacy must be something that is done both in the church and in the community. And I think that that's a banner that we must take up, because that is something that I truly believe is inherent to the gospel of Jesus Christ and is embedded in the third angel's message. And until we understand that, even our present truth and our prophecy will be incomplete and inaccurate, and it will not actually provide the salvation, the redemption, the healing, the restoration to anyone that it has the power to provide, simply because we continue to permit our humanity to prevent us from being able to truly demonstrate the love and character and power of Jesus Christ.
Wow. I'm supposed to, just that answer, I'm gonna post that answer. that was literally, it's so true. Like, everything you just said, I totally agree with. Because I'm like, thinking about it now, we say we are followers of Christ and we try to emulate him, but I'm like, how, if you look at us in regards to how Christ walked on this earth, anything he said, anything he stood up for, he did. Like, he always acted. He was very, very proactive. So like, are we as Christians, as Adventists, as people that say they follow Christ, are we being proactive, or are we just speaking and staying at the pulpit? Like, we need to do the work, because it says he that listens needs to do. So I'm like, Why are we
Yeah.
not doing?
Do not just be hearers of the word, but doers of the word. Absolutely.
Exactly. So I'm like, we need to actually go on and actually do the stuff that we say we are so against in a sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been rough. I remember because in the beginning of the year, when Kobe died, and I was like, Kobe. This year, I'm like, Lord, just take this year and throw it away. Just throw it.
Yeah. No,
It's
for real. That's been the post. That's been the post I've seen from Black people. It's just like Kobe, COVID,
Yeah, literally.
now Chadwick. Kobe and Chadwick
Yeah,
Boseman represented
pinnacles.
something in Black communities that very few people represent. And so yeah, their deaths meant something to a generation of people, particularly my generation, but a generation of millennials, and working young adults who are just like really overwhelmed. So it's like you lose Kobe, you lose Chadwick, and then in between losing the both of them is all this police brutality, is losing just Black people nonstop. And so that's a lot.
Yeah, it's sad. I think what gets me is, have you seen the pictures of the kids with like all their little Avenger toys? And I'm like,
Yeah.
my heart. I'm like, the next kids, like the next generation will just never die. They'll never die.
And yeah, it's
I'm like, breaks your
it's
heart.
real. It's so real. People are all kind of remembering, when they saw Black Panther for the first time, how that movie made them feel. And just all of Chadwick Boseman's work. He had a very interesting career when you kind of look at it now in hindsight, in that he has always portrayed our heroes. He was Jackie Robinson, he was James Brown, he was Thurgood Marshall, he was Black Panther, he was in a film that depicted a Vietnam War veteran. So he has always been a representation of our best, our brightest, our strongest, both in our past, in our present, and even in our future imaginings. And so what he has represented and been to us on screen represents something that I don't think that many people who are not Black or who don't live in the States can really comprehend. So that losing him was like, it wasn't like losing an actor or losing a movie character. It was like, I said in my sermon on Sabbath, it was like losing a monument. And I guess one thing that, his life and ultimately now his death has most certainly made him into a monument for sure. Because he and his art are forever,
Literally.
forever chronicled, planted. I can't think of the word right now, but
Fossilified. I don't know.
yeah, like, ingrained.
That's the word.
Like he is officially a legend. And for
Yeah.
anyone who has seen Black Panther, he is in the ancestral plane, and that is a beautiful thing, yet also such a sad thing,
Yeah.
because whenever a king dies early, it always causes a lot of sadness. But we know that, we do have a greater king. And I'm promised, and I have a hope that because Christ is our true king, that there is going to be a day where we will be reunited with even Chadwick Boseman and be able to have probably one of the greatest conversations with him ever, in a restored body where he is healed and he is no longer emotionally, psychologically, or physically bearing the burden of cancer.
So thank you so much for spending your late hours of the night with me.
No problem. No problem. It was a joy. It was a pleasure. It was so great to meet you. And again, so grateful to be able to come here and have this conversation with you.